The medical AI was flawless. It had scanned warlords and kings, predators and scholars, and never once erred. Its verdicts were final, written into archives that stretched back millennia. No cadet passed through the Imperial Academy without facing its judgment. Its core was housed beneath 3 layers of neutron shielding, seated in a chamber cooled to sub-zero to preserve its perfect neural lattice. It did not reason like a living being. It compared, analyzed, filtered. Genomic data ran through its systems like sacred scripture. It did not simply diagnose, it classified. Before it, a cadet's bloodline, planetary origin, immune profile, cellular aging rate, epigenetic response history, and ancestral resilience were all laid bare. There was no appeal. No correction, only the verdict. The first in line stepped forward, a tusked warrior from Drex Prime, hide knotted with calluses from 100 ritual battles. His chest rose high, nostrils flaring as he stepped into the scanning ring. The machine activated. A hum filled the sterile air as silver-blue tendrils of light traced across his skin. Internal diagnostics began. Ultrasonics mapped bone density, electromagnetic pulses scanned neural pathways, spectral cytometry analyzed blood oxygenation in real time. The screen blinked. Rejected. Murmurs rippled through the hall. The cadet stood, stunned. His tusks had shattered enemies. His species had colonized 2 war moons. But the machine was unmoved. The next stepped forward a scaled lieutenant from the Pilari Reach. She stood 2 meters tall, her eyes reptilian and alert, body tempered from vacuum drills and deep gravity maneuvers. Again the machine scanned. Again the screen pulsed. Insufficient. Another sleek avian wings partially clipped in ceremonial tradition. His heart rate fluttered as he entered the circle, eyes darting with the alertness of a predator. His bones were carbon-threaded from birth, his blood enriched with trace metals for oxygen optimization. The lights swirled, a pause. Unfit. One by one, the cadets stepped forward. Some were strong, some cunning, some carried bloodlines known across 10 systems. They were the heirs of battle-hardened empires, the chosen of clans that bred only excellence. And one by one, they were dismissed. Unworthy, defective, genetically insufficient for command, for legacy, for continuation. The machine was merciless. In the back of the hall, the instructors stood unmoved. They had seen it before. This was no punishment. This was purity. Only the rarest were marked worthy. An instructor with 4 steel-threaded arms raised his voice. The AI rejects all but the exceptional. It was meant to soothe. Instead, it set the room buzzing. Who, then, was exceptional? The laughter started when the final name on the list was called. Daniel Everett Knox. He stood, human among giants, no claws, no exoskeleton, no ritual scarring, no visible weaponry. His skin was soft, his gait was plain. His face bore a fading bruise from a gravity acclimation drill he hadn't even complained about. Pray, someone hissed. If that thing calls him fit, sneered another, then the machine is broken. Daniel didn't react. He just stepped forward and sat in the diagnostic chair. No ceremony, no drama. The machine activated. Light spilled from its core, curling like threads of liquid code around his body. It scanned his epidermis first, noting sun damage, callus patterning on his hands, the faded scar near his right knee. Then, it dove deeper. The room began to shift. The lights flickered once, a thing no one had ever seen. The scanning tendrils hesitated, then rewound, focusing again on his thoracic cavity. His cardiovascular readings scrolled across the instructor's display. Resting heart rate, 56 BPM. Slight murmur. Echo of an old rib fracture. Scarring in both lungs from particulate exposure. Again the tendrils shifted. Neurological mapping began. The machine stuttered, paused, then restarted the process. Cadets began to murmur again. It's failing. It can't even find a category for him. Maybe it thinks he's already dead. Daniel remained still. He didn't look at the screen, didn't speak. Then the AI's core light shifted, glowing a hue not listed in the system manual. The air pressure in the room changed. Not from the machine, but from the expectation from the cadets holding their breath. waiting for the next R ejected or defective. The display flickered. A single word appeared, nothing else, just 6 letters, carved into light. Survivor. No rank, no lineage, no designation used anywhere else in the known empire. Just a word that hit the room like a vacuum breach. The hall fell utterly silent. Not even the machine moved. Daniel exhaled once, quietly, like he'd been waiting to breathe again. The instructors rushed forward. Monitors were checked, diagnostics ran again, data lines were traced, but there were no errors, no interference. The machine had scanned, processed, and rendered a verdict. Not a rejection, not even a classification. A declaration. Survivor. Daniel stood up. His eyes passed over the cadets who had mocked him. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Because now the machine had said something no one else could explain. And no one would forget. The instructors stayed behind after the cadets were dismissed, arguing in low tones while the AI's diagnostic data looped in unreadable columns across auxiliary displays. Tech teams were summoned. The machine's logic pathways were examined for signs of corruption. Power levels, signal pathways, thermal fluctuations, everything was triple-checked. No anomalies. No glitches. No malfunction. The AI had chosen the word deliberately, and it had never used it before. A sealed archive was unearthed by one of the senior evaluators. Buried beneath medical flags and authorization locks, a subroutine was discovered untouched for centuries. It detailed an ancient override protocol meant for only the rarest of genetic signatures. A classification system independent of species-specific merit. Not strength, not purity, not combat potential, but response to extinction events. A metric hidden deep within the machine's architecture, dormant for lifetimes. It had activated itself. And it had used it once. Survivor. By the next day, the academy was humming with uncertainty. The word had traveled faster than any official briefing. Cadets stopped pretending not to whisper about it. In the mess hall, conversations lowered when Daniel entered. The ones who'd laughed before were quietest now, not afraid, not yet, but uncertain, hesitant. He sat alone, not by choice, but by quiet consensus. Across the room, a reptilian cadet who had earned top honors in close-quarter combat watched him with narrowed eyes. That thing has to be broken. Then why not give you a category? Asked another. You survived acid trials. I didn't survive them. I trained for them. There's a difference. At the edge of the table, a thin insectoid cadet spoke softly. What if it's not about what he did? What if it's about what his species is? Silence. They all looked toward Daniel. He was using a spoon to scrape a protein block from its tray. Nothing extraordinary, just eating. Like he hadn't just been named the only life form in the Empire to earn a verdict. The machine itself had pulled from deep archival silence. He didn't look up. That afternoon, the interrogators called him in. He sat calmly across the interface table, an embedded lens scanning his eye movements. Behind mirrored glass, a half-dozen high-ranking officials watched, flanked by med specialists and behavioral analysts. The lead interrogator, a sleek-furred Carnassi named Veril, leaned forward. Do you understand the significance of the designation given to you? Daniel shrugged once. Not really. You are the only cadet in recorded history to receive anything but a rejection from the medical AI. No enhancements, no elite breeding, no planetary conditioning. You weren't even top percentile in your intake. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Thanks. Veril ignored the sarcasm. Explain your medical history. Daniel folded his arms. Childhood illness, had pneumonia twice, shattered my arm falling off a roof when I was 9, cracked ribs in a cycling accident, appendix out when I was 13, mild frostbite, dehydration once, during a hiking trip, got food poisoning bad enough to hallucinate once in college. One of the medics behind the glass winced. Veril paused. And yet, no gene therapies, no immune augmentations, no structural reinforcement? Daniel shook his head. Earth doesn't do much of that unless you're rich or born defective. You get hurt, you heal. Usually, if not, you don't. There was a long pause. Verrill tapped the screen. You said you shattered your arm. Fully? Compound fracture, Daniel replied. Radius and ulna. Bone tore through the skin. It took surgery and 9 months of rehab. Verrill leaned back slowly. Most of our cadets would never recover from such an injury, not without full regrowth chambers. Daniel blinked. That's your baseline? For the elite, yes. There was a silence. Then the monitor behind Daniel blinked, and the medical AI's synthesized voice filled the room. Query. Define adaptive survival. Verrill frowned. Proceed. The AI's voice was smooth, monotone. Adaptive survival. The ability of a biological system to maintain function and continuity, despite conditions of resource scarcity, environmental volatility, sustained trauma, or systemic collapse. Current subject possesses multi-layered evidence of adaptive survival at both individual and species levels. Daniel turned slightly in his chair. That's what you scanned for? The AI continued without acknowledging him. Subject's genome exhibits traces of multiple environmental bottlenecks. Mitochondrial lineage indicates historical exposure to famine, pathogen outbreak, and climatic shifts. Epigenetic markers show accelerated immune pattern diversity. Cellular resilience above standard deviation. Pain threshold variable, but consistently self-managed. Verrill's voice was soft now. You are built to survive things most species never experience. Daniel didn't answer. The AI did. Subject classification. Not predator, not prey, not elite, not evolved for conquest, not refined by optimization, refined by catastrophe. No one moved. Not the instructors behind the glass. Not the techs. Not Daniel. The AI made one final statement. Survivors are not the strongest, they are simply the last ones standing. The screen dimmed. Daniel stood, without being asked. And this time, no one stopped him as he walked out. By evening, the logs had been copied into 3 secure databanks and encrypted under high-authority protocols. But even among the most controlled systems, information bled. Across the galaxy, whispers began. A species had survived famine, plague, war, collapse, and endured. Not because they conquered, but because extinction had tried them and failed. The Empire had bred champions. Earth had produced survivors. The distinction was subtle, but it terrified the right people. Training resumed, at least on paper. The academy drills were designed to challenge the body, discipline the mind, and simulate conditions from every known combat environment. Gravity shifts, atmospheric instability, sleep deprivation, controlled exposure to low-dose nerve agents only under strict supervision. But now, the atmosphere felt warped. Because no one looked at the obstacle courses the same way anymore. Not after Daniel. Cadets started pulling medical reports on human physiology, quietly, illegally, in some cases. They downloaded evolutionary logs, reviewed atmospheric pressures of ancient Earth, and cross-referenced historical survival statistics from pre-spaceflight human conflicts. And the deeper they looked, the stranger it became. Humans had no exoskeletons. Their musculature was weak compared to most predator species. Their vision had a limited spectrum. They couldn't regrow limbs. They overheated easily. But their biology carried redundancies. Scars in their DNA, ghosts of past wars. Mutations stacked like geological strata, each one a signature of a disaster survived. Wait, a Zentari cadet muttered one evening in the library. Scrolling through comparative trauma studies, they burned themselves as a medical treatment? Across the table, another whispered, they used to crack their own bones back into place. They used fermented poison as medicine. And they did all this without regeneration chambers. That last part landed like a dropped blade. Not adapted for perfection. Adapted for recovery. The medical AI had already made its declaration, but now the cadets were beginning to understand the depth of what it meant. Daniel was pulled aside by one of the instructors midway through a heat resistance drill. Instructor Malix, a rigid-limbed avian with precision in every syllable, held a tablet in one hand. Your thermal tolerance is 20 degrees lower than your squad mates, he said without preamble. I know, Daniel said. His undershirt was soaked in sweat, his lips were cracked. That's about right. You kept going. I could still move. Malix narrowed his eyes. That is not the standard metric we use here. Daniel coughed once. Yeah, well, Earth didn't have standards, just seasons. Malix didn't reply. He tapped something into the tablet, then looked up again. Why didn't you signal for medical? Didn't think I was done yet. Malix watched him another long moment, then said, Your species confuses resilience with stubbornness. Daniel wiped a hand across his face. Yeah, so does everyone else, until one of us is the last one breathing. At the end of the month, the Academy conducted its endurance field trial, a 72-hour simulation in rotating environments with restricted supplies and unpredictable hazards. No lethal elements, but injuries were common, failures more so. Every cadet was assigned to a mixed-species unit. Daniel was grouped with 2 Drex, a Zentari, and a hybrid from the Arska belt. The trial started with a simulated avalanche, then a sandstorm, then oxygen-thin air, then a blackout. By the second day, 2 cadets in his unit had dropped out due to hydration complications. The third suffered cold-induced myopathy in one arm. Daniel rewrapped his own knee with borrowed bandage tape and kept walking. By the end of the trial, the only 2 still standing were Daniel and the hybrid, who collapsed 10 meters from the finish and was pulled out by drone. Daniel walked the rest of the way alone, one step at a time. Face burned by simulated UV exposure. Blood dried on his leg from a split that should have been stitched. Vision blurred, body limping. But he crossed the line. Then passed out. He woke up in the medical ward, throat dry and muscles locked. A med officer sat beside the bed, tablet in hand. Her uniform was formal black, with a surgeon's insignia etched into the shoulder. You tore your left ACL, do you know that? Daniel nodded weakly. You should have stopped. I wanted to. You didn't. No. The officer tapped the tablet, then turned it around. It displayed a graph his biometrics during the final hours of the trial. Spiking cortisol, collapsing glucose, degrading motor function. You shouldn't have been able to walk. Daniel didn't look at the screen. She set the tablet down. There's a word, she said quietly. An old one from your planet. Hominin. Ancestors of humans. We studied their fossils. Daniel glanced at her. They had no tools, no weapons. They just walked. Across deserts. Starving, dying. But they didn't stop. That's how they moved from continent to continent. Daniel's voice was hoarse. Sounds familiar. The medic looked at him. This isn't about strength. It never was. You weren't faster. You weren't better trained. You didn't have enhancements. He nodded slightly. You just didn't break. The instructors requested a meeting with the medical AI again. No cadets were present. They posed a simple question. Why survivor? The machine replied instantly. Because the subject's genetic lineage does not prioritize dominance. It does not select for peak performance. It selects for endurance through collapse. A pause. Then it continued. Strength fails. Intelligence miscalculates. Purity decays. But survival adapts. The subject represents a species that thrives after failure. The instructors were silent. Then, the machine said something none of them expected. Current galactic civilizations are optimized, stable, controlled. They have forgotten collapse. Humanity has not. Silence again. Survivors, remember what others cannot imagine. And then the machine powered down. By the end of the cycle, Daniel's knee was still stiff. He could walk slowly, and not without a limp, but sprinting was out of the question. The ligament damage from the field trial was healing, but recovery for an unaugmented human took time. Weeks, if not months. And yet, no one treated him as weak. Because now, the cadets understood what kind of creature could still walk through injury, with no medical backup, through a simulated hellscape designed to break the best. Not for pride, not even to win, but because something in him refused to stop. No one said it aloud, but training drills subtly shifted. Sparring became less about raw power and more about attrition. Endurance tactics entered conversations. More cadets asked for scenario simulations involving long-term deprivation or prolonged stress environments. They didn't call it pulling a Knox, but they all knew that's what they were doing. Daniel never said much about it. If anything, he seemed quieter since the designation. Not withdrawn, just tired, not of the work, but of the attention. Of being looked at as something new, something mysterious. He didn't want awe. He wanted to blend in. But he couldn't. Not anymore. The instructors watched him more closely now. He'd been tagged for long-term observational tracking. His health reports were duplicated and flagged for irregular resilience markers. Even his meal consumption was analyzed for insights into metabolic coping during injury. It wasn't just the cadets learning from him now. It was the entire empire. A formal announcement arrived 2 weeks later. All graduating cadets would be reclassified per the new Imperial fitness standards, an overhaul prompted by the AI's reactivation of ancient survival metrics. Daniel's classification remained locked. It had not changed. Survivor. One word. It appeared again during the final ceremony, glowing above the hall where the Academy's highest-ranking officials gathered. The same display, same hue, same weight. The room was silent when his name was called. He stepped forward slowly, the slight limp still present, but steady. The pain had dulled, but not disappeared. Recovery was a long path. He'd accepted that. He always had. He received no medal, no award, just the record. That was enough. He returned to his place in line. No one else moved. After a long pause, the head administrator Vice Marshal Ilor, a being of unnaturally long life and crystalline skin, stepped forward and addressed the assembly. "Cadets," he said, voice amplified through the chamber, "you have been trained to lead fleets, to administer planetary operations, to win battles before they begin." He looked across the room. "You were trained to prevail." He gestured behind him, toward the still glowing word. "But one of you has been identified not as a leader, not as a conqueror, not even as a weapon." He paused. "But as a warning." Every gaze turned toward Daniel. Elor continued. "This title was not bestowed by choice. It was identified, extracted, from data too ancient for ceremony, and it tells us something we would do well to remember." He stepped forward, standing before Daniel now. "In peace, we honor strength. In war, we admire strategy. But when the stars fall, when systems burn, when order fails, strength and strategy die first." The hall was utterly still. Elor turned to face the crowd. "Survival is not glory, it is not cleanliness, it is not fair, it is the slow refusal to yield, even when the world ends around you." His voice dropped. "And in that moment, the survivor is the only thing that matters." There was no applause. No salute. Just silence. Daniel didn't bow. He didn't raise his hand. He stood still. Because he knew that in survival, there was no finish line, no end point, only the next day, and the next, and the next. He left the academy the following week. Not escorted, not celebrated. Just walked to the transport dock, carrying his standard pack. He stopped once to adjust the strap where it irritated the still tender skin near his shoulder blade. From a balcony above, a small group of cadets watched him go. The reptilian who'd once mocked him didn't speak. The hybrid who had collapsed before the trial's finish exhaled and said, softly, "That wasn't a test for him." "No," said the Centauri beside him. "It was routine." On board the ship, Daniel took a window seat. As the engines warmed, a soft tone chimed in his console. A message. FR. Imperial Archive. Medical Division. 2. Daniel Knox. Subject. Final record. Biological designation. He opened it. It was short. Classification. Survivor. Designation. Locked. Survivors adapt. Survivors prevail. End of record. He closed the message. Outside, the stars began to blur. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and breathed. Back at the academy, the AI remained sealed in its chamber. Inactive. Waiting. Until one day, months later, it scanned another. And the lights flickered. But the screen remained empty. Because the verdict had already been written. Once. Perfectly. For the one who would not stop. The one who, when extinction looked him in the eye, simply kept walking. The survivor.